A big welcome to those of you who are old Elliottonians, that is, those of you who have been at the school way back in the past when this building opened. There are several people here with us today, who were former Elliott students of 1956. I was a little confused there because I was going to say Elliott when I meant to say Ark Putney Academy students. That's us. Thank you very much for being here with us. Not everyone can be here with us this afternoon, so you are privileged in that respect, and that you will see a very serious and important event take place. Yesterday, you will all know, those of you who were in school, we had a World War I study day to mark the centenary of the opening of the First World War. And during that day, two students wrote a poem which they are going to read to us in opening this afternoon's event. So this is Arbana and Leah who are going to read you their poem.
Remember, remember, the men who stood in the cold, waiting to fire their guns.
Remember, remember, the men who wrote from the trenches to their dear loved ones.
Remember, remember, the men who sacrificed their lives to save our beloved country.
Remember, remember, the men who never thrived, who were left in the blood and the mud.
Remember, remember, all the men that died, they fought, oh, so proudly.
Remember, remember, all the children that cried, they cried, oh, so loudly.
Just remember all the men, the boys that came to our school. Today is their 100th anniversary.
We send our love to the heavens above. We will remember them forever.
Thank you very much. As you all know, remembrance ceremonies are solemn occasions. Death is always a subject we approach with great seriousness. Death in war is particularly difficult because lives are cut short, often in violent and disturbing circumstances which are always difficult to understand, especially for those who grieve. Friends, for example, children like you, lovers, husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, and us as well, for we are here today to mourn the loss of our fellow students whose names appear here on our wonderfully restored school memorial. As you know from the work you undertook yesterday, it is 100 years since the outbreak of the First World War, and it is the horror and destructiveness of that war and the devastation that it brought to millions of families that we are especially here to remember today. And it is in this act of remembrance that the reality of what we have lost will be impressed on our minds. And it is especially the young men who sat where you sit now. That is the crucial thing about this. These are people that were members of our school. The young men who sat where you sit now, the former students of our school, the memory of whose sacrifice we are here to witness. And we do that by wearing our poppy, the symbol of blood spilt. And by wearing our poppy, we are making the promise that we will remember them. We will remember them. This is why we are here. We will remember them by laying wreaths of poppies. We are prepared to do that. In front of the names of the fallen. The fallen are the names, the word the fallen refers to those people who have died in war. We will lay wreaths of poppies in front of the names of the fallen. We will observe our silence by hearing the last post played on the trumpet. If you are unfamiliar with that, be prepared for it because it is very moving and quite loud. It may make you jump when you first hear it. It is a very important piece of music to know about. It is a final salute to those people who died in war. So this will be our act of remembrance. which we regard as our duty, and a duty that is passed down through the generations. So I had it from my father, and I have brought it into my life as a teacher, and I want to hand it on to you, who are the next generation. And we remember and we commit ourselves to this duty, lest we forget, which is another expression that we use in relation to remembrance. Lest we forget. We take this action lest we forget. We mustn't forget the names of these people on our memorial board. And as we commit ourselves to this remembrance ceremony, each of us will have his or her individual stories in their minds. It is why history is so important. All of you will have family histories. Whether you know it or not, you will all be, in some way, your histories will be touched by war. You look into it, you will find that that is the case. Perhaps the more we remember, I think, the more peace in the world, which is what this event is dedicated to, will be a possibility. Sumal, from the sixth form, who will lay the first wreath, knows that his great-grandfather volunteered to join the Indian Army, many thousands of whom died in the mud of another continent, far from home, which is a reminder to us of the thousands of troops from all over what was then the British Empire, sacrificed their lives for king and country. And Rachel, who is also going to lay a wreath for us this afternoon, who knows her family history well, will think about her great-great-uncles, great-great-uncles, a long way back. On her mum's side, George and Bertie. Both of these men died of wounds they received at a place called the Dardanelles. And Walter, another great uncle of Rachel's, who was killed at the Somme, another battle. And on her dad's side, Charles Henry, whose life was taken at the Battle of the Somme, aged only 19. Aged only 19. Aged only 19. These lists of men are young men taken in the prime of their life to be soldiers, and whose lives were lost, and who will be remembered by their teachers. If it was you, we would remember you. Us teachers would remember what happened. How do you think the head teacher of the Elliott Central School, which is what this school was called at the time, how do you think he thought about it? How do you think it affected him? These are some edited extracts which I'm going to read to you, which are taken from the school magazine of the time. He was called William Price, the head teacher. These entries are called From the Headmaster's Desk. November 1914. So, exactly 100 years ago. The sad news has come of our first loss, he writes. And T. Cooper has died of wounds received. He was at Mons, and who came out from that awful time unhurt, but he has since been wounded. And on the 7th of this month, he died after a few lingering days. So you can imagine this death to have dragged on and on. We can only offer our sincere condolences to his family, says the head teacher in his news to the school. The following note on June the 15th, he says, came from the parents of S. Cheney, who say, I do not know of his whereabouts. I am unable to trace him at the front, which is where the fighting was. My letters since February last have been returned to me, so it is a source of great anxiety. She later found out that he had been killed. September 1915. Jack Baisley was seriously wounded. Sounds like a boy in a class now, doesn't it? A note from the nurse at the hospital came saying he was very sick from his wounds, and on the 13th came a letter from the chaplain announcing his death. Unfortunately, his mother, who was ill at the time, on the receipt of the news of her son's death, died herself on the same day. It is what war brings, tragedy upon tragedy. October 1915. Each month, unfortunately, he says, brings its tales of sadness. And we now mourn the loss of Harry Bint, who had been in the trenches for 11 months. He had at last secured a long hoped-for leave to come home. We were all looking forward to see Harry again, and word came that he would arrive in London by the 3 o'clock train on Thursday morning, but he did not come. He was shot through the head an hour before he started for home. It was at Victoria Station that his father received the news that his son was not coming home, and the reason why. November. The head teacher by this time is beginning to feel the pain of the loss of all of these students. We begin to understand more fully, he says, the side of war that makes all civilized nations hate the thought of it. Hubert Ransom came to see me before sailing with the Royal Garrison Artillery to the Dardanelles. Dysentery brought him down. Dysentery was a terrible illness of sickness and diarrhea that killed people, and you were as likely to die from that as you were to die from being killed by enemy fire. And the head teacher ends up by saying, this is the sad side of war, when we see strong youths cut off at the threshold of their lives. I have asked his parents to accept our deep sympathy, and you will all respect the feelings of his brother and sister now in school. As we sit here, we may imagine what it was like to be the brother and sister of Hubert Ransom, and how the rest of the school would regard us and feel for us, and what a tragic thing it would be. And I think of the head teacher and of all the letters like this he may have written on behalf of students who were killed. On our list, this is the list on this side, the dark side of the panel, there are 56 names. So there were 56 students who were once at Elliott. There are 100 or so people in the room here at the moment. So half of you, therefore, if we think of it like that. So there's the headmaster's impression of what it would have been like to lose his students. These are the reasons that some of us are laying wreaths today. I have my own personal reason for doing it, which stems from the time when I was the same age as a Year 7 student, when I used to go with my father to a war memorial, and he used to point out the name of my grandfather, whose name was Fred Tucker, on the memorial. And for several years after that, I stood beside him at this memorial every year at Remembrance, this time of the year. Fred Tucker, my father's father, was a cook in the Navy, and he signed up to a ship called the Hms Monmouth. The Hms Monmouth was a ship as big as this whole of our new building here. Imagine it as big as that, a big grey cruiser. So there would be lots of cooking to do, for Fred to do on the ship, to look after all these sailors. The whole crew of the ship was 1,500 men and boys aged from 15 upwards. So, we're not very far away from Year 10, age 15 upwards, are we? And the ship was in the South Pacific, in the very southern part of the South Pacific, when it got into a conflict with the enemy, and the ship was sunk, and the ship, as it was sinking, exploded from end to end, and it is said that those people who died either died from the extreme cold of falling into the sea, or they died from the heat from the inside of the ship as the ship burned and exploded. Everyone was lost, including Fred Tucker, November the 1st, 1914. November the 1st, 1914, 100 years ago last week. And my father, this is the thing to remember, and this is what affects me. My father was born on September the 20th, 1914. So that is, he was born 2 or 3 months before his father died on the other side of the world. So he never knew his father. He never knew his father. So So it is that loss that I feel on behalf of my father, and when I look back, I sense that as we stood and looked at memorials like this, at this time of the year, I sense that he felt that loss. I felt that I could see it in his eyes. So that's Fred's story, and that is why I am standing here with you, because I want to recognise that in my life. And I want to share it with you. And I thank you for allowing me to share that with you. But we are here as members of Ark Putney Academy and as members of the former Elliott School. And we want to recognise today, particularly, the old Elliottonians who fell in the First War, because this is our centenary remembrance ceremony. And if you look in your little pamphlet that I've given you, you will see that we are about to approach the ceremony of remembrance. And we're going to start that off with Leanne and Man, who are going to read out the lists of the names of the 56 men who fell in the Great War to start with, and then we'll follow that with a traditional poem that is read at times of remembrance, which ends with the words, "We will remember them." That will be followed by a silence, and this silence is absolutely crucial. The silence is when we think about the sacrifice that these young people made, and that we perhaps think about how we, in our own individual lives, might avoid there being wars, find a way to find peace in the world. For example, I will not tell you what to think. And then, at the end of our silence, we will lay the wreaths before the memorial as a symbol of our respect for those people who are listed. And then you will hear the two pieces of music, the trumpet, the last post, and the piece of music, very serious piece of music called Nimrod. And that will bring us to the end of our ceremony. So we will start the ceremony of remembrance by reading the names.
J. Alborough, A. Ames, G. Ashby, W. Ailes, L. Baisley, H. Bint, F. Butcher, R. Cheney, S. Cheney, J. Crawshaw, T. Cooper, R. Dillaway, W. Drake, W. Fleet, H. Gamble, C. Headland, A. Hill, A. G. Jackson, H. Jackson, G. Keller, A. Kiln, C. Kirby, W. Lathy, L. Marlowe, W. Monroe, A. Hall, and J. H. E. McCall.
A. Pine, E. Poley, W. Priest, H. Ransom, R. Reed, H. Randall, R. Rhodes, W. Roberts, F. Rollinson, J. Roper, H. Rosser, W. Charmaine, H. Simpson, W. Smeaton, C. Smith, E. Smith, H. Spearman, C. Spooner, C. Stevens, H. Timpson, A. Walker, F. Wanmer, E. Weller, S. Williams, R. Wood, and G. Young.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning we will remember them. Thank you very much for participating in our ceremony of remembrance at Ark Putney Academy in front of the Elliott Memorial. And thank you for being here with the former members of our school, our old Elliottonians. Mr. Dix was the gentleman who laid a wreath on behalf of the old Elliottonians. Thank you, sir, for being with us this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to say a couple of things. I've been moved twice this week. Today has been a very solemn occasion, and I would like to thank all you pupils, for attending this service. You have shown reverence and you have shown attentiveness and politeness, which is absolutely key in this world today. The second time that I was moved was last Thursday, when I went and saw the poppies at the Tower of London. It was a very, very solemn occasion because, like Mr. Tucker here, my wife, her grandfather was killed in the First World War. So looking at those 888,000 poppies, and I'm sure you all know that 888,000 was the number of soldiers that were killed in the First World War. And it isn't until you look at what that represents around that moat in London that you realise just how many people that is. My wife's grandfather was killed. He was only out in France for 3 weeks before he was killed. And we have made a pilgrimage out to Balliol, where he was killed, and found his grave. And as your colleague here has said, that he found that some of his family had enlisted in the Indian Army. Was that right? As you look around the graveyard, the one we looked around in Balliol, there were Chinese, and there were lots of graves of Chinese. And when I came back, I searched why Chinese, and found that there were a lot of Chinese that were in the graveyard because they were used as ammunition runners from foxhole to foxhole, keeping the guns going. And that shows that it was a real world war. And that really did affect me, because it isn't just those people on the memorial. They are the ones that we know. But there were lots of different people that were involved in that war. Yeah. And when you look at the memorial, and I'd like to thank the head and Michael for getting it cleaned, and it is a magnificent memorial. And you might be interested to know that the wooden surround was actually made by the pupils of the Elliott School in the woodworking classes back when the Elliott School was in Merton Road. So that is a tribute, the tribute of the actual pupils then. I think it was in the late 40s it was constructed. So that's the contribution by the actual pupils of the school. So once again, thank you very much for attending and for being so polite and attentive. Thank you very much.
And I just want to reinforce what has been said. You've been fantastic today. You've listened really, really well. I'm very proud of you all. Now what we're going to do is to make sure that we end this properly is we're going to dismiss students row by row, and we're going to go make our way back to the classroom. Sixth formers are welcome to stay and join the old Elliottonians for a cup of tea, and then I'm going to talk to those of you who remain a little bit about the future plans for the school. So if we start by doing that, so my class, if you want to start training and make your way out, please. Next row, please. If you can follow on, please. And see if you follow on, please. Okay, so if we start with year 7 over here, if you stand up, first row, please. Follow on. Next row, stand up, please. Follow on.